Started now. So today we're going to be looking at the Anglo-Saxons. Not obviously the Anglo-Saxon culture per se. We're going to be looking at the Anglo-Saxons and Anglo-Saxon art. And this may come as a bit of a shock to you all. I know this sounds patronising and condescending, but the Anglo-Saxons were only a civilization that we see in history that existed in Britain. Okay? That may sound odd, but it's not as odd as it sounds.
Because Anglo was part of the two words.
Yeah, Anglo. Angles would have been a continental term, and Angles, there you go, Anglo-Saxon. So what we're going to do is start off with is a style of art, a style of craftsmanship, a style of metalwork that comes through most of the lecture today. And then we're going to have a scratch and sniff. Now, I do get the pronunciation of this word completely wrong. It should say cloison, which is an ancient technique for decorating metalwork. Well, anyway, I've been told I'm completely wrong in my pronunciation, but for me, it'll be cloison. Cloison work is something that you would see on metalwork. And then between the metalwork sort of outlines, you'd have vitreous enamel or gemstones. Vitreous enamel is basically liquid glass. And other materials put within these wonderful outlines, creating panels on a metal artifact. The decoration is formed by first adding compartments in the French cloison and to the metal objects by soldering or fixing silver or gold wires or thin strips placed on the edges or thereabouts. These remain visible in the finished piece, separating the different compartments of the enamel or inlays, which are often of several colours. Cloison enamel objects are worked on with an enamel powder made into a paste, which then needs to be fired in a kiln, giving it a liquid form, and then after it comes out of the form, the enamel powder itself becomes a solid. That's basically a similar way of making pottery. But for those that do not have a faint, foggiest idea what I'm talking about, we will go on. And as you are well aware, I do not like reading little pieces. Now, this is a nice illustration of Anglo-Saxon craftsmanship. It's your fault, Lynn. Anglo-Saxon craftsmanship. And this is within a wall of one of the 50 examples of Anglo-Saxon churches still standing in England today. And there are up to 250 Anglo-Saxon churches that claim to be Anglo-Saxon in Britain. And the one thing about this is that this is Anglo-Saxon craftsmanship reused in a wall within an existing Anglo-Saxon church known as Wirksworth in England. Lots of these Anglo-Saxon churches are, funnily enough, called St. Mary's or St. Peter's or St. Paul, you know, the usual names associated with the Christian canon, as it were. So these wonderful bits of carving, and we're going to have a little look a little bit more. You can get all the shapes and forms, a few capitals, a few sort of panels, maybe associated with the sarcophagus. This is wonderful craftsmanship from the Anglo-Saxon period. The Anglo-Saxon period that you can roughly look at is the period when historically Hengist and Horsa arrived in England, Kent, in the year 446, again, or thereabouts. Now, when we think about the likes of Hengist and Horsa and the Anglo-Saxons and the Jutes and the Franks and the Frisians and all those other wonderful people coming from the continent, they were small numbers of individuals that in turn influenced the history of this side of England for a very, very long time. And that side of England was occupied by the Cornish that we've already looked at, and the Cumbrians and the people of Cymru. So, when we think about the Anglo-Saxons themselves, they're a law unto their own. They were people who would move into a community, and by ipso facto, that community would become Anglo-Saxon. So Alan, you evil, horrible man, you've come into this room and you have decided to be the ruler of this class. We are now to all be called Alans. And that's basically what Anglo-Saxon civilization was about. And we've all got to dress like you, Alan. We've all got to wear the same glasses, and we've all got to wear moustaches, including you, Kathy. That is Anglo-Saxon civilization. We've got it, and unless we do what you tell us to do, Alan,
Yes.
we're all for the chop. So, Kathy, start growing your moustache by next week. If you shave a lot and sort of hormones and stuff, you'll have a big moustache. You'll be good, fine. And then you'll become an Anglo-Saxon. If you don't do that, you'll be executed. That's the way it works.
Yeah.
What's that?
Give you a spade now.
Exactly.
But isn't he supposed to have long flats? Which I could manage.
No, you'll be a better Anglo-Saxon than him. Did you see what happened there? Hang on, he's got a head disorder. There you go. He's got baldism on his mind. There you go. It's good. I've got another hole to dig out of there. Sorry, Alan. Don't take it personally. But this is Anglo-Saxon civilization. So let's gently move on and let's just carry on where we were. Now, the art of Anglo-Saxon England. And it's not quite the same cover as your book, but the art of Anglo-Saxon England is truly illuminating in a gentle and powerful sense. The Anglo-Saxon world wasn't to be seen as a dastardly attempt at mass genocide of the population that some historians would like you to believe. I know the eminent Professor Roberts, Alice, known to her friends, would agree with me that the Anglo-Saxon epoch was not an invasion, was not a mass slaughter of people. It was more like the Borg of Star Trek, who would integrate whole populations into their way of life. And to be honest with you, Alan, I don't think you'll kill Kathy next week. She'll have a long plats, and that will do. So it's assimilation over time. Over time, and that's what we're talking about. And overnight, the Anglo-Saxon world, we weren't all suddenly called Anglo-Saxons. It took a long, long time. And in fact, in the language that we call the English language today, half of the words in the English language are words that were developed by the Angles, the Saxons, the Franks, the Jutes and the Frisians and all those other people coming over from the continent. But mark my words, that the Anglo-Saxon period is not the same period as the Viking period. These are two very separate types of people. Anglo-Saxon art, real or artificial, very real. Silver, gold, craftsmanship. And craftsmanship that was equal to any that came before and was equal to any that came after. The Anglo-Saxon world, again, illuminated within the terms of the illuminated manuscripts from Lindisfarne and other localities where these wonderful works have survived from. Very different histories. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, again, all illuminated works. If we compare with last week and where we were last week, we gently see that more has survived from the Anglo-Saxon world than our worlds. But that's probably because of the excesses that we faced at the time, constant invasion. But the Anglo-Saxons faced constant invasion, but they were more organised. Look at Alfred the Great. Now, we're going to have a scratch and sniff, okay? If you've got a piece of paper, write them down. One of these is not Anglo-Saxon. This is number one. This is the reverse swastika. Is this an original Anglo-Saxon design? Write one on a piece of paper, I'll keep you in your mind, yes or no. The next one, there's four altogether. Is this Anglo-Saxon? The cloison, lots of these, very difficult to work out whether these are garnet or enamel paste. But these are definitely garnet, okay? Is this originally Anglo-Saxon? Number two. Third one. I don't know why that's there. Yes. Moving on. Is this number 3? Is this Anglo-Saxon? Number 3. Yay or nay? And then, some of you already know the answer. Is this Anglo-Saxon?
What's the prize?
The prize is a night with Dennis on the beer.
That's worthwhile then.
No, there's no prize. You know, I know Dennis owes me a load of drinks, but I won't force them upon you. Right, okay. Now, who thinks that number 4 isn't Anglo-Saxon? Isn't. Okay. Anybody? You all think this is Anglo-Saxon?
Yes.
Next. Is this Anglo-Saxon?
Yes.
Yes.
No? Yes? A few in the room? Okay.
Sutton Hoo.
Yes.
Is this Anglo-Saxon?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. And last one. Is this Anglo-Saxon?
Yes, definitely. No.
No.
They're all Anglo-Saxon.
No red herring with this, darling. There is one that isn't Anglo-Saxon. Anglo-Saxon?
Yes.
Anglo-Saxon? Never mind. Not Anglo-Saxon. Surprise, surprise. And this is the Alfred Jewel Anglo-Saxon. So the wonderful illuminated world has foxed a few of you. Now, I know some of you believe that this is otherwise known as the Sutton Hill helmet. If I get my facts right, Basil Brown, 1938. Excavations on the estate down in oh God, hang on. Where I always get the county mixed up. Norfolk.
Suffolk.
Got it wrong every time. But we'll go on to that in a minute. Right, this itself is the inverse swastika. The swastika used by the Third Reich and the cults associated with the Third Reich had the swastika facing towards the right rather than the left. This is of Anglo-Saxon design. This was utilised and used by peoples in Germany 1,600, 1,700 years ago. And I know you want to say something, Peter.
It's cropped up in India too on wall carvings.
Lots of places, yes.
Similar design, isn't it?
It's a symbol of peace, wasn't it? Or something
But don't get hoodwinked by texts that say that the Nazis were the inventors of the right-facing swastika. The Anglo-Saxons also used the right-facing swastika as well as the left. Interesting point. Rewrite history there. This is quite a small design. Okay, lots of these brooches, roughly no more than about 10 centimeters in diameter. Some are much smaller, but you'll see the difference between a modern version of a swastika and an Anglo-Saxon version. You can see all these little holes here. You might have garnets, emeralds, lapis lazuli in these. You might have le croissant. Really depends. But this itself, this nice sort of bronze design, would have been worn by somebody. Next. This itself, like many of these brooches found, and we come across a little reference towards women being the only people who wore these. Nonsense. In fact, men and women would have worn these designs. We'll just have a little look. This is usually, the background is usually bronze, a bronze background, and as you can see there, the bronze is actually coming through. So you've got this creating these panels, the wonderful gold on the outside, trailed gold, beautiful design, and within these here, you've got the garnets. This is either going to be either enamel or glass or something like that, and this here, you might have a tin enamel of some kind to give the white colour, or that might itself be mother of pearl, as might be around here. So this itself is about 10 centimetres and there may have been 2 of these, you'd have had a cloak. And between the 2, there would have been a terminal coming out here, or associated with the back, and there would have been a bit of chain to hold your cloak. Now, Kathy knits, and I'm sure that if you made a cloak completely made of wool, it would be heavy, wouldn't it, Kathy? And if you wandered out in the snow, that cloak would be extremely heavy. These cloaks would need these 2 brooches on male and female with a little chain to carry the cloak. Not little pin badges as you see with some reenactors who go out in their fairy world to reenact the past occasionally. Those that do it properly have 2 really nice brooches to carry a cloak. Men and women wore cloaks, so this is a unisex design. Even though the world of the Anglo-Saxon woman was not under the thumb as lots of people think it was. And we know we've looked at that before. I should do these really much quicker. There you go, the Sutton Hoo helmet. Maybe this was the Sutton Hoo helmet of Raedwald, or it was somebody else, but this is a Saxon design, and we've worked out that the DNA of the people buried at Sutton Hoo are from Scandinavia. So therefore, they are not Anglo-Saxon. Therefore, this is not an Anglo-Saxon helmet. It's not an Anglo-Saxon burial, it's a Scandinavian burial. People call it an Anglo-Saxon burial, but it's not, because it's from a completely different culture. Therefore, the Vikings came over here a lot before. We're told when they came over here. They were settling, they were living, they were intermarrying and all the rest of it. So Danelaw was being created a long time before historians want us to believe. History always lies. And if those events of the harrying of the North hadn't have been written down in the 790s, we would look at the archaeological evidence and say the Vikings were coming in around 620, 630 or 640, a lot earlier than they say, living alongside the Anglo-Saxons and the Romans and everybody else who lived in Britain, and this is not Anglo-Saxon. I know people don't like me saying that. There you go, Alfred made me. But we'll come back to Alfred's Jewel. This is known as Alfred's Jewel. This is an Estelle, which is like a little pointing, top of a pointing instrument. So here we go, perfect. This is about 6.2 centimetres by over 3 centimetres by just under 1.5 centimetres thick. So it's basically a pointer. There would be a rod on it, or some kind of a shaft, and there would be a golden rivet, which I know you would crack on that one. There'd be a little golden rivet that went through the shaft or the ivory rod, which was used as a pointer. You know that was deliberate, don't you?
Yes.
So, I want to say something, but going back to the Anglo-Saxon ship burial. No, I've made the mistake. Going back to the Viking ship burial at Sutton Hoo. This is a purse of a gentleman, Scandinavian gentleman, that was buried at Sutton Hoo. And I just wanted to make the point that just because you see brooches doesn't mean to say that they were just used by women. Just because you see the design of a purse doesn't mean to say it was used only by a woman. It's equally used by a man. That's the point I wanted to put across. All artefacts in the past should now be seen on a multi-sex footing, and every single artefact in the past should now be seen as something that could be used by anyone of any creed, culture, or anything else. This sort of old idea of looking at things as being all masculine and feminine needs to disappear. And what were you doing last week, Ellen, in a blacksmithies, when blacksmithies are all men? Women in the past were equally blacksmithian as much as men were. As we see before the First World War, suddenly all women were able to make horseshoes. How was that? Because they were doing it there all along. Anyway, this is from something fairly famous. This is one of over 3,000 items from the Staffordshire Hoard. Now we've all heard of the Staffordshire Hoard, which is now on display in the Birmingham Art Gallery. Cost them over £3.2 million to purchase, found in a field, Staffordshire way. Now, this is typically Anglo-Saxon in design. And the reason why it's typically Anglo-Saxon in design is because of all the little beasties and all the sort of representations of gods and mythology and legends and all the rest of it, and all those other things that go rather bump in the night, which can be said to be similar to our sort of mythology and all the rest of it, but ours is more tighter scroll work. Ours is more sort of more akin to being more organised than the Anglo-Saxon idea of mythology. And obviously the Anglo-Saxon work, there's been a lot more found than in comparison with anywhere in Cumbria, Cornwall and Cymru. Very strange that we've got the gold mines, and it makes you start to wonder that there are gold mines somewhere else to be discovered in Britain to have actually produced this stuff in the first place. We didn't produce anywhere near the volume of stuff that even eclipses what's been found at Staffordshire, let alone what was produced in the past. The treasure that was found at Staffordshire represents 0.0001% of all the gold treasure and all the gold material in any way, shape or form produced in the Anglo-Saxon period. Most of it was melted down, most of it was reused and so on. Some of it's still in the ground. Moving on. So, gives you an idea. I decided deliberately not to do the Staffordshire treasure because I think it's extremely boring, to be honest with you. But then again, I did actually think I was going to put it at the end anyway. So we got stuff. We're looking at the Staffordshire Hoard anyway, because the reason why I say it's extremely boring is because most of it is similar, and it's basically a scrap collection. It's a load of material that was buried in the ground to be discarded by the Anglo-Saxons in one way, shape or form in the past. And what you see from the Staffordshire treasure is not the best of the best. Okay? If you remember looking at the helmet from Sutton Hoo, even though it's from a different culture, this helmet was deliberately broken up, or it was in such a bad state when it was buried. The whole point is that when you go to Valhalla or wherever you're going, you would have your stuff reforged. So your broken sword would be reforged. So you would be buried with a broken sword when you had broken in battle. Because when you go to heaven, everything's reforged. So a broken helmet's perfect. You can start anew and have it reforged. Don't go to heaven with your best helmet. Give it to your son. Don't go to heaven with your best sword. Give it to your daughter. Okay? This is why, in many cases, we see broken material deposited in the past. I know some of you don't like J.R.R. Tolkien, but if you look at the Lord of the Rings books and the films, there's an area in the book where it talks about reforging the sword. Remember that bit? They're reforging the sword. That sword had been broken, and J.R.R. Tolkien was actually basing lots of his understanding of where he was. He was a historian. He studied all this stuff. He was grabbing all these little bits from the Anglo-Saxon and Viking period to create Lord of the Rings. Some people say it was based on the fight between good and evil, between the Germans and the British or whatever. But J.R.R. Tolkien was writing a long time before this. It was about the Anglo-Saxons. It was about the Romans. It was about the Vikings and all that type of stuff. And forging the sword is in it. You go to heaven with your paraphernalia broken up. When you go to heaven, you're broken. Okay, Valhalla. When you go up there or down below, you're broken. You've got to be reforged, renewed. And this explains why these things are broken. And what must the items have been like that survived these burials, i.e., right, Dad, you're gone now, I'm going to use your sword to parade around with. The helmet must have been wonderful that he actually had, but he was buried with a scrap version. Okay? The point I'm trying to make is the Staffordshire treasure is probably the worst of the worst. What must have these sword pommels been like? Okay, the pommel on the sword, this is this end, or these may have been bases for scabbard holders. But these were being collected together, over 3,000 items, by a scrappy. Do you know what? I knew exactly what that was out there, but I wanted the word scrappy in your mind. By a scrappy, right? Somebody was going around collecting all these bits and bobs together from different villages, putting them there, right? And they were going to melt them down. Or then again, they may have thought, right, we've got a new religion come in, let's just bury all this stuff, get this out of the way and start anew. So much gold around they could eat it. We don't really know what's going on. But over 3,000 items were being buried. And they were excavated out of the ground by archaeologists in 39 blocks. They had to excavate them and they had to take them to the laboratory and excavate them in the laboratory. So much material was found. Moving on. Again, these little bits, these little items from the Staffordshire treasure itself, the Staffordshire Hoard. This is actually from a religious book. This is solid gold. And you've got some Latin on there, okay? The archaic form of Latin, and that's actually associated with a small religious manuscript, a missal, or a small holy book. And they thought, right, we don't need this holy book anymore. We'll just get this thing scrapped. Never got scrapped. Look at that there. This is scrap. This is tat. To us, this is some of the best treasure. It won't. It's Lynn. It is. It's an evil spell. Stop it, Lynn.
I don't cast them anymore.
Yeah, I'm living with the effects. This here is a folded cross. This is a bent and twisted folded cross made of sheet gold. That's a beastie there. This is one of numbers of thousands of items. These are little. These are what can only be described as little rivets for belts, you know, or ornate ones, or these are the tops of small daggers. These are actually only really small, these things. The dagger must have been tiny. Or they're studs or whatever, okay? You've got all these items and they're still encrusted with some of the gunk that they come out the ground with, and now it's all been washed up. Right, so what we're going to do now, we're going to look at this, the Alfred Jewel. Now, Ellen, isn't that beautiful?
Yes, it's lovely.
It is beautiful. The Alfred Jewel itself, we'll do the description of the Alfred Jewel gently and tenderly. And in short, this says Alfred made me. Okay, a few more words on it but that's basically what it means. This is the Alfred Jewel. There's rock crystal underneath that. You've got these wonderful trails of gold, and you've got all this coloration. This is probably mother of pearl. This is probably ground down lapis lazuli or something like this. And we've got all this. This is emerald type colour, bit garnety looking colour there. And there's a dragon there. And this, remember, is basically 6 centimetres in length from there to there. It's tiny. There's been another example found a few years ago, but this was found in 1690 odd. Like lots of these things, the person who found it didn't know what they were looking at and could have just tossed it away. The Alfred Jewel is a masterpiece of goldsmith's work, formed around the tear-shaped slice of rock crystal. Its inscription, Athelfric Mek Hayek Gafgan, Alfred ordered me to be made. Alfred made me. Connects the jewel with King Alfred the Great. The Great. How many kings and queens in Britain have been called the Great? There's one other. That's your homework. Alfred the Great, 871 to 899. He was the great. He was the great unifier of the land of England.
Did you read in the paper that they thought he had been interred whilst still alive?
Interred whilst he was still alive.
He'd gone on a bender and suffered post-bender paralysis. And they thought he was dead, but he wasn't. He was in a coma.
Oh God. I need more information on that. Bring that along next week. That's great. It's making it amongst the most significant of royal relics. In fact, Alfred the Great probably ordered hundreds, if not thousands, of these to be made, and only one has survived, and another one has survived associated with another ruler, and that's it. Alfred ruled the southern Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Wessex in modern-day Wiltshire, unifying large tracts of southern England, including bringing the Cornish into sort of subservient client state. The Danelaw itself came under ipso facto rule from the Anglo-Saxons. They basically had to pay money to the Anglo-Saxons. So Alfred the Great was truly the great ruler of the land. And he was a learned man. He knew a number of different languages. He wrote some of the laws that you can occasionally see enshrined in our everyday lives today. And with these wonderful books, okay, so I think you've got a religious book like that, the Astels, or it's basically the pointer, and the jewel itself. So what you're doing, you're thinking, I don't want to touch that because it's a holy book. Let's just move some of the pages over. We'll follow it. No, I'm not really interested in that. Let's just do this. Okay, so you don't actually have to touch the holy book. This is what these are for. And they'd be given as gifts. The dragon-like head that you've seen on the base, it's a pointer. You've got an ivory shaft, and you've got the golden rivet to join the jewel with the ivory shaft, and the golden rivet goes through. The figure represented in delicate colours in croissant enamel on a plaque protected by the rock crystal, and maybe some of the croissant design may have been from ground down emerald or garnet and so on. We don't know. May represent the sense of sight. Basically, you're on a bit of rock crystal because it's illuminating. The rock crystal's illuminating. You look up to the light and you can see it shining through. You can see Alfred looking at you. It's a tiny little thing. Wow, look at this. So it's illumination, and the manuscripts are illuminating. You see the link there. It was found in 1693 in a field in North Petherton by a farmer, Somerset, very close to Athelney Abbey. The reason why I wanted to mention Athelney Abbey is because Athelney Abbey itself was the first place that they filmed the very first episode of Time Team. 100th episode later, they filmed another Time Team there. Athelney Abbey, this jewel itself, linked very much with Alfred the Great, and then the eventual defeat of the Vikings at the Battle of Edington in 878, the great victory over a great army by a great king, Alfred the Great. His authority extended over most of Britain, including Cymru as well, who would have paid tribute to the great Alfred the Great, because we were friends. Well, we were once. Moving on. Again, just a few details. Gold, enamel, rock crystal, just over 6 centimetres in length, 6.2, just over 3 centimetres in width, 3.1, and 1.3 centimetres in depth. It was kept by a certain Colonel Palmer, and it was donated to our wonderful land in 1718. It wasn't placed into a private collection. It's quite likely that there are a number of these out there that are in private collections, but obviously if they're declared by rich landowners, then they're probably going to be seized and placed into museums. So there you go. There's lots of stuff in the dark record, the black record, that we don't know about. So you've got the dragon here. You've got the wonderful colours. Alfred made me. And look at this as well. I saw this and I thought, didn't I actually see my mum with a mirror like this when I was a child in silver? Back of a silver mirror. You remember those Victorian ones? Doesn't that look very similar? And do you know what I actually thought? I actually went into a bit of a dream world. I know it was completely wrong. I thought, wouldn't it be great to sort of prize these little bits of gold up, okay, that fasten this gold plating, and see what is actually under that. Is there anything between this wonderful crystal and this piece of gold? And I thought, can't really do that because it would all these little bits of gold would just break off. But you do have the technology now to scan in there to see if there is anything behind this panel. I wonder if they've actually done that. Be nice to know the answer. So there you go again. Lovely, beautiful. Oh, and there, the dragon head there, and that is meant to be a representation of Alfred the Great himself, with the what do you call them now? The croziers of office here, the staffs of office in his hands, and obviously that's going to be mother of pearl as well. Beautiful, very small. Could have been lost very easily. Illuminating the Lindisfarne Chronicles. Lots of these survive from the 700s all the way to the 900s and so on. It makes you wonder why these weren't destroyed when Iona and Lindisfarne and all the rest of it were burnt down by the damnable Vikings. Or were they burnt down in the first place, these monasteries? How did these books survive? Wonderful illumination on here, and you've obviously got gold leaf as well. I did actually silly ask somebody the other day, if you had a load of religious manuscripts and you burnt the manuscripts, would you be able to extract much gold leaf off them? And we come up with the idea that we'd have to have a huge pyre of these religious books to actually try and get sort of a tiny little bit of a gram of gold. Just an idea. I don't think we will. I think I'll be arrested and put away for 1,000 years just to try out an experiment. I know you've got loads of these books in your house, Ellen, with gold leaf in, but don't worry, they're safe. Moving on. Hang on. It's Lynn again. Something's gone wrong. Oh, there we go. Lynn, stop casting your spells.
Sorry.
I'm going to cut the lights a minute, because something like that. The Anglo-Saxons were a crucial group who inhabited Great Britain. Crucial. They were key to our understanding of all our history. They were key to our development. They were key to the survival of the Roman world, because the direct descendants of the Roman world were the intermingling of the Anglo-Saxon culture with Roman culture, and what Roman culture had survived was Christianity. There's this big argument which has been poo-pooed really, but there's a big argument of whether when St. Augustine came over, whether he brought Christianity for the first time. And the answer is no, he didn't, because Christianity had been here for hundreds of years before the Roman Church interfered. And what we're looking at with the Anglo-Saxons is that they British indigenous groups, number of them, the Cornish, direct descendants from the Romans, all those tribal peoples and so on, saw that the aspects of the Anglo-Saxon world and the language could be nicely adopted. The Anglo-Saxon language was a lot more simpler to understand, for example, than the Latin that was being put around by the monastic orders at the time. But then again, Latin survived for at least 1,000 years from that point. But Anglo-Saxon was more of an English language. And as I said, over half of Anglo-Saxon terms have made its way into the language today. And it's the period up to 1066. The Anglo-Saxon world catastrophically ended in 1066. And I think that's a good point, a good place to be, because it was a disaster for the peoples that had existed in Britain before 1066. 1066 was a bloody day. It meant the slow erasal, sorry for that word, of the culture of Cymru, Cornwall, the Anglo-Saxons, and in lots of aspects the Scots and the Irish as well. In 1066, from that moment onwards, Britain belonged to William the Conqueror, the whole of Britain, including right over Scotland and no doubt Ireland. All the aristocracy was to be replaced. This was such a heinous act. Before that, the Romans didn't come over and annihilate all the aristocracy that had existed before. They integrated them. Same with the Anglo-Saxons, they integrated some of the existing aristocracy. Same with the Vikings as well. They used Eboracum and its ability to be a trading centre. They brought in the aristocracy. The Anglo-Saxons were nothing like the Normans and William the Conqueror. 99% of all the aristocracy across England was wiped out by William and his Normans.
One Anglo-Saxon bishop survived. Wulfstan from Worcester.
One.
Yes.
And one earldom as well. One earldom. That's it. Don't know how, but it did. And this is why we should look more tenderly at the Anglo-Saxons. This is why we should give them a lighter history than the history that's brought to us from the stories brought down to us by King Arthur and all that fighting. But that's something else. The the use of the term Anglo-Saxon assumes that the words Anglo-Saxons were the only peoples that settled across this land coming over from Germany. But we cannot just assume that, because Franks settled, Jutes settled, Frisians settled across our land. They also influenced the language, the people, and who was doing what across this wonderful landscape. We'll do a few more illustrations, and we'll have done an hour from that point. Bingo. I know, Kathy, I'll turn out the light. She talks to me at night. Didn't get to sleep last night. Right. This itself is a map of where all these shenanigans are coming from. Now, this is interesting. I don't know where this map comes from, but they're saying that the people from Scandinavia are coming over a lot earlier than the 600s, the 500s, but we'll move on from that one. So what we're talking about, the Saxons occupying in these areas here. Sussex, named after the Saxons themselves. And then you've got the Franks coming over, occupying areas of the south again. You've got the Angles. Where does the name East Anglia come from? I wonder where. From the Angles. You've got the Frisians coming over. There's I think we did this a few weeks ago about the Frisians, a group of people naming the land where they moved into in England. You've got the Jutlanders as well, moving into Kent. So these are all these people, and there's many more peoples of names that have been lost. Those are 5 that we've got here. So they're just moving in, and they're. Would I be right in making the following analogy? When we look at the culture of Britain today, as a metaphor, we've got Muslim communities, Hindu communities, Sikh communities, Jewish communities, Mormon communities, all these different communities, all different people coming in and integrating. Okay, and that's what we're talking about. But the hub of Great Britain is still the people that were here before those waves of people coming over here, and before those people again, and before those people again. And it's all an intermingling. It's all a sort of influence within society. And look at that beautiful brooch, a silver brooch. Kathy and Lynn, stop casting your spells. There you go. So about 10 centimetres across, it's a lot smaller than that. You can see this is based on a silver background with gilt on it, trail of gold. You've got this sort of enamel of tin. And there's another point to be made here. Actually a point. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Swastika. 1, 2, 3, 4. If 4, always 4. It's almost the magical number to these people is 4. Beautiful symmetry, geometry, number 4. There it is. And you've got it from me. The cross itself, to the Anglo-Saxons, perfect, is 4. So, you could say in mythology that the number 3 is important, the number 7 is important, but the Anglo-Saxons, the number 4 is important, and you see that in their art, repeated over and over again. And again, bringing in that swastika.
Who would be wearing that brooch?
A man or a woman. There'd usually be 2 of them.
Would they be wealthy, or would they be...
We'll take that a minute. So it could be a cloak brooch, just a single cloak brooch, where it comes around here, connected there, or there'd be 4. Probably you'd have, I think this, if you've got 2 brooches, you're obviously more richer than somebody who's got 1 brooch. Good point there. Not to sound patronising though. But then again, you might just wear one brooch on a cloak because that was your style. So that might not be a good analogy. It's all more to do with Wonga and your money and your influence. And obviously people with fair wealth would have had these, but then again, poor people with a little less wealth may have had versions of these that weren't as pronounced and as proud as these designs. So hopefully that answers your question in a way. Obviously poorer versions existed. where I drive around in a Ford Focus. Kathy drives around in a limousine. This itself may have been your poor man or woman's brooch, but it's quite ornate. But it's clearly on an alloy background, and it's just a dip of gold on it. Just that's it. That's fine. These are the cloisons, enamel again, glass, but this would have looked really good anyway. A little bit of a fin missing there. This would have looked really good. Put it there, job done. Okay, or it could have been owned by somebody who's fairly wealthy. The problem is, it's that thing today, is it not, that you can get extremely wealthy people out there that dress like tramps, and you can get people who don't have any money dressing like lords. You can't always see somebody's wealth by what they're buried with. It could have been like, oh, you know, Uncle Eric, who's died last week. You know that brooch that we found in the field belongs to somebody else. If we bury it with Uncle Eric, right, nobody's going to think we ever stole it. But Uncle Eric was poor. So you can never tell. You can never tell. Okay, here's a good one. Somebody's buried with a gold wedding ring, right? They were somebody who didn't have a lot of money. Somebody else who's buried isn't buried with a gold wedding ring, but they were a multi-millionaire. How can an archaeologist know what's going on? Might be to do with religion as well. Look at that there. Now, this is where we come into it. There you've got Emerald City. These are proper emeralds. And these are garnets. Okay? And that there is your tin enamel. And that's there your gold. A lot of gold on that. Okay? So this person meant business. But then again, this could have been the only thing they owned. So how can you tell? There are people out there who drive around in a car and they don't own a house. They live in their car. Doesn't mean to say they're wealthy. Somebody who owns a house doesn't have a car. Doesn't mean to say they're wealthy or poor. My parents are extremely wealthy, but they don't have a car. The reason why they're very wealthy is because they haven't wasted their money over the years on cars. So there you go. And just one last thing, we're gonna have a break on this one. Right, I cut this off the internet, but I like to give an unbiased view of the past. This is another writer, and I don't really agree with this. Who wore Anglo-Saxon brooches, and what were they? Brooches were known as dalach, can't work out the pronunciation, or spennels. To the Anglo-Saxon, they were mainly worn by women. Don't agree. How are the men supposed to fasten their cloaks if they're not? Do you know what I mean? It don't make sense. So 450s, 650s. Women wore brooches in pairs, 1, 2, in order to fasten their dresses. Cloaks. Shut up. Dresses. No. Whereas single brooches were probably used to fasten cloaks. Bingo. Brooches were usually made of bronze, copper, alloy, but were sometimes made of iron and decorated gold or silver. We've got gold and silver examples. Whoever wrote that really hadn't studied this stuff, but obviously they are being used by multi-people, men and women, and used to fasten cloaks or whatever. So there you go. So what we're going to do, we're going to end on one last illustration, and then we're going to have a break. I'm rather busy in the break organising things, so if anyone's got any questions, ask me when we get back to it. But this itself, they're not all circular, but we'll come to this after the break. Alan, could you do me a favour? Deplug. What I mean by questions, ask me any questions that's relevant now, but not sort of when we're... Anything?
I brought some things along to look at.
Ooh.
Oh my God, is this the thing she was on about just to wind me up?
Yeah.
Okay then,
Right.
anything else? Right, okay. We'll have a break. Thank you. So here we go again. This is basically, this would be side on. There'd be one there and one there with a nice train. Obviously Anglo-Saxon art is not just, whoever's coming through the door, you're going to have to sit in. Go on, gather around.
No,
Sit in.
Just stand by here, sorry.
No, go on.
Yeah, there's a chair there.
Go and join us.
Chair.
Join us. Go by there. Get rid of that silly
I
bag there.
didn't see it, Jay. He was just gone.
So
Right.
what you can clearly see is a really nice garnet there,
Move down a bit.
and this is a nice piece of gold work on there as well. So everybody, calm down.
Are you in a hurry?
What?
Are you in a hurry?
Am I in a hurry? No, I'm just trying to
This is meant for sealing.
Yeah, give it to him in a minute.
You
Flip
can
back.
it now. Yeah.
This itself, as you can get an idea with the scale, that's 1, 2, 3, add them together, that's 4 inches across, so roughly 10 centimetres in diameter. So what we've got here is it looks perfectly solid gold, but then later on at some point in time they drilled little holes through it. And these little holes reveal the bronze base underneath. And you've obviously got a nice little bit of silver in the centre. So it's a lovely piece, but again, the number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, this idea of 4. This is probably a poor man's brooch, or a poor woman's brooch, but then again, it's still really good looking. Costume jewellery of the time, but again, very interesting. And this is not so costume jewellery. This is obviously, you're looking at something extremely beautiful. Extremely beautiful. And what you can see again, the 4 there, and you've got garnet again, and these here, and you've got a bit of mother and pearl. You can clearly see that's mother and pearl there as well. So they're really making best use of their stones. And it tells you again that the Anglo-Saxons weren't short of a penny. And they weren't short of having the ability to trade. Because garnet, emerald, lots of these precious stones come from abroad. So you've got extensive trading links. And that ties us in with something I said last week about the trading links that Cumbria, Cymru and Cornwall had with the continent. All those ideas about King Arthur and so on. Again, that's one that we've already seen. Again, giving you a good idea. We've looked at that one as well. But this is really cute. And we actually come back to something similar. Only 4 of these beautiful cross-shaped brooches to this level and standard have been found in Britain. Okay? And I've got a little description of these coming up. But these are pendants rather than brooches. There'd be a little loop there. Or there may be another little loop hidden somewhere else, but it's likely as well. I think in description, the other one is these are all little bits of garnet. This is not cloison. This is not cloison. This is in the other one. It clearly says these are all garnet. It's completely full of garnet.
Mosaic then, isn't it?
Pardon?
Like mosaic.
It's like a mosaic design. Yeah, it's a lot of work. And if you look at this, right, it's all still there. It's all still there. Are 1,700 years. It's still intact. But these ain't huge. These ain't that size. They're a lot smaller. And one is coming up, but we'll come on to that one in a short while.
That's obviously highly polished as well. The garnet's usually
Yes,
black.
very, very
Sort of
polished.
Garnet Hoo.
Look at this here. Again, back to what you said, Goff. Oh wow, yes, but this is Goff's point. Most of society had these things because if you think of Anglo-Saxon England, and then you think of everything else, obviously the Anglo-Saxons are covering the Jutes and the Franks and all the rest of it. You're thinking that everyone wanted a bit of this fashion. So we're probably talking about the Anglo-Saxon area of maybe up to about 2 million people spread across that whole area. Population had dropped since the Roman period. It didn't get back to 7 million until about 1315. So the height of the Roman period is about 7 million over the whole of Britain. And obviously the big chunk of the area of the Anglo-Saxons was about 2 million sort of people. And it's likely that everyone would have wanted one of these. So obviously millions of them are around, either melted down underground. You can't really melt something like this down. The interesting thing, if you look at this as well, you've got a little leaf of gold there behind the glass. Okay, the enamel here. This isn't garnet. The gold is making this wonderful red glass shine. It's making it shine from behind. That's gold there. Gold is used underneath, and there's gilt on the top. Look at that again.
Yeah, I'll have that one.
You can have that one. You may have had somebody having 2 of these. or if it's for a double cloak, or it's for a single cloak, or whatever. You've got one or two of these. That there's likely to be garnet. These are likely to be garnet, but this is probably the cloison, and so on. So you can see the gold there when it works. It's sort of intertwined. It's beautiful, beautiful. And again, they've got silver as well. They've got silver workers around here as well on a base metal. So this is a little bit about the swastika. Okay, you come in at the right time. The swastika design is known from artifacts of various cultures since the Neolithic, and it recurs with frequency throughout the world, particularly throughout the Germanic Iron Age. So whoever said that swastika is definitely Anglo-Saxon, they were very, very right. It's not only something that occurs within the Anglo-Saxon world, it's something within the Western Hemisphere. I know some of you are going to say Hindu and all the rest of it, but let's look at the Western Hemisphere. It's occurring across the Scandinavian world as well. And there are lots of names for them. And let's give it a stab, and I'm going to totally screw this up. It's known as the Gamandion, the Fefot, the Crux Gothica, the Flange Swartz, or the Angled Cross. And strangely enough, even though it's got a background in Hinduism and Buddhism, okay, and across these cultures in the Iron Age, strangely enough, it became massively popular, not in Germany in the 1870s, but in Victorian England. So there's one in your pipe and smoke it. So it's really across there. We don't really need to say anything more than that. And just think about that. It was massively popular in Belarus. So the Russians are coming across this design in Belarus and are thinking, why have we got all these swastikas on sort of artifacts that are from about the 900s? What's going on here? So the Russian archaeologists must have been very confused when they actually invaded Belarus in 1944. And I'm sure that lots of this stuff would have been destroyed because it was the wrong interpretation. Yeah? They would have, oh my God, they're swastikas! It's Nazism! But it wasn't. It wasn't at all. And it's likely that anybody, and this is a good point as well, it's likely that anybody who had a swastika in their homes that was Iron Age, somebody would have come in and said, you're a Nazi, and they would have destroyed it. People could have been carted away for this. Can you imagine in museums in Britain having swastikas on display and people saying, you can't have a symbol for the Nazi party on display? That's what would have happened.
Yeah.
This is what's so exciting about this. People have got this so wrong. And the other thing as well, it's not just left facing. The four-fold rotational symmetry is also right facing in the Iron Age. And the swastika symbol in the Germanic Iron Age has been interpreted as having a sacral meaning associated with Odin and Thor. I needed to put that in there. This itself, if you can think, right, look, before you say any more, I'm not going to buy you one of these as a Christmas present, Steve. All right? This itself is a crude iron badge, okay, that was created in the 1920s, 1930s, because the swastika just didn't come overnight for the Nazi Party in the 1930s, in 1933, and with the seizure of the state in 1935. This was something that was brought in through the ranks of people who saw this as a cultural deposit of German origins in the 1920s and the 1930s, and even before that. And as an archaeologist working in Germany, I would have worn one of these as well, because the only way I would have been working as an archaeologist in Germany would have been I would have had to have enlisted in the SS, and I would have been working for the Anna Nurbe, and I would have been a state archaeologist, because I would have had to have believed in all this to have carried on working in Germany in the 1930s. And I would have had to have gone into all the rituals and stuff, but that's another lecture altogether. I know too much. This itself, this is a very interesting. This is actually, they find objects like this, cremational urns from the Iron Age, probably also later as well. From the Iron Age, lots of these have been destroyed and smashed up, so we can't really get radiocarbon dates on them anymore anyway. What happened is lots of these were found. The Anna Nurbe, the German SS archaeologists, and were finding these and thought, right, what we're going to do, we're going to reproduce some of these, and then they're going to be given as gifts to high-ranking SS and the Nurbe officers, right? It's all that complicated stuff. So there's lots of reproductions of these, but you can tell where the reproductions are and what are the originals, because the swastika has been facing to the right rather than the left, okay? Because lots of the German examples from earlier on faced to the left. So obviously later on, and a Nurbe archaeologist, even Heinrich Himmler would have had one of these as well, with the swastika facing right.
The Germans, just to translate this, they don't call them swastikas, they call them hooked cross.
Yes,
What that's worth.
the hooked cross,
Yeah.
the four
I don't
hooked
know where
cross.
swastika comes from, what languages. That's worth a Google maybe.
It is. And the other thing as well is, sorry, British Fascist Party, 3 sort of hooked cross, and that's also seen in the past, but move on. So this itself, you can see this design in a brooch, excavated here, and that looks very much, you can imagine having one of these on display in the museum thinking, oh my God, you can't have this Nazi symbolism on display, and it wasn't. Moving on. Look at that. That is beautiful. But that is a swastika. And guess what? It's a right-facing swastika. An archaeologist in the Anna Nurbe, a high-ranking archaeologist, an original artefact from the Iron Age would have had this as an adornment. This is Anglo-Saxon. No doubt about it. It's Anglo-Saxon. It's gold. I haven't got a description of this. I'd love to think that was garnet. But that there is beautiful. The design, we all agree it's beautiful. Let's just forget about it. Yeah, it is. It's beautiful. But you wouldn't wear that today. It's just wrong. Look at that there. Again, is that illustration on your book? Where's your book? Where's that book of yours? Is that on your book? It's not quite, but it's close.
Similar.
It's very similar. It's probably from the same book. It is. But this itself. An illustration from an Anglo-Saxon work, and there's wonderful king there.
What's he sitting on?
He's sitting on a throne, and in fact, this might be his ascendancy to heaven. He's on the throne, okay? He's playing a miniature harp.
A dove above him.
And why not? Hang on a minute. Let's get the facts right. This guy is using his money. He's using his resources for the monastery. He's giving land to the monastery and all the rest of it. He's paying for people to illuminate these works, paying for the gold leaf and all the rest of it. And this guy deserves to go to heaven because he's given his money to the church. And there he is.
Why is the bird got his beak in his head?
Yeah.
It is on his crown. Even better. I don't know. It's a dove of peace maybe. But we've got a lot to go through quickly. So if we can... Lindisfarne Book of Kells. There we go. Beautifully illuminated. More gold leaf there.
I've got a miniature book of Kells at home.
Bring it along next time. Again, Lindisfarne Chronicles, all dating from the 700-800s. Again, beautifully illustrated. And even on individual pages of these wonderful various Anglo-Saxon chronicles and religious works, you've got the Lamb of God. And you've got 2 down there. Or the Ram of God. So you've got 2 of them. So the illustrations, the colours must have been really garish and beautiful. And that's very linked to our Llancarvan church. This is also from an Anglo-Saxon work. It's not coloured, but there's the bowels of hell. This is the wonderful symbolism of what Christianity should be about. Angels, the ascendancy to heaven. Let's all get up there. But there are people who don't get to heaven. Those that are dragged into, as referred to 500 years later, Dante's Inferno. But this is in a religious book from the Anglo-Saxon period. You can date that as well from the type of architecture as well. Typical Anglo-Saxon architecture from the 700-800s.
So what sort of religion would have been around then?
It started off with paganism, but they quickly got taken over by Christianity.
So that's Christianity.
That's Christianity, yeah. So again, this is a little strap end. So if I took my trousers off now, the strap end would be sort of half that, and this would be on the end here. It's a tiny piece of work, but lots of people have strap ends for their belting, for their clothing, for their legging. Strap ends themselves beautifully ornate, but this is really small. It's only about that length, and people would have had a number of strap ends. These beautiful, they're usually in bronze, but cloison design as well to fill this in with some enamel. So we'll do that. And this itself, look at that. The description of that is it's all garnet. It's all complete garnet. Every single bit of that. That is a beautiful find, and there's a wonderful story associated with that. Beautiful piece of garnet there. It's all work garnet. And look at that there. These little areas here, that's the gold. Little bits of garnet have come out. What we're going to do now, this is, there's only 4 of these. You've seen 2. This is one which was found in the 1970s. This is from the 600s. A gold cross with garnet inlay found on the peninsula of what is Burton Pidsey Stands. It says stands there, not sands. Given rise to the name the Holderness Cross. It's known as the Holderness Cross. It was found by Ronald Ray, a farmer, on the surface of a muddy field in which he kept his pigs in the 1970s, but it was not recognised for what it was until 1998. Basically, this guy, you can imagine, this farmer going around in his wellies. Oh, look at that there. He picks it up. He thinks, oh, it's a bit of tack. My daughter's dropped. He could have made the decision to either have kept it there and then, or chucked it back into the pigs. Most people would have chucked it back into the pigs because it would have looked dirty. It's just a little plaything. Daughter found it in a drawer in the kitchen, okay, and it was his daughter who took it to Hull Museum in 1998. There's so much tat in people's drawers that are so valuable. The cross, which may have been made in East Anglia by the Angles, has rectangular arms with cloison cell work. This is filled with shaped garnet, and at the end of the cross is a boss formed by a large garnet, whose face is incised with a deep circle, probably originally inlaid with gold. So the garnet possibly had gold inlaid into its shape. You know, it was acquired by the museum probably in about 1999 for nearly £70,000. It's probably valued today as about 120 or something. One found at Stanton in Suffolk. Has been in the Ashmolean possession for some years. Another is in a British museum, and a 4th one found in a coffin associated with St Cuthbert. That's now in Durham Cathedral. So these are beautiful artefacts. What we're going to do now, I'm gonna just do 3 more minutes, and we're going to call it a day, okay? Because I know one of you is inking to go. So look at that beautiful design, that beast there. It's a small little badge. You've got a bronze background, but you've got an alloy metal here, and this wonderful gilt on here. And look at that. That's known as the Fuller brooch. And do you know what? We can tell you exactly what this Fuller brooch is about. So what we're going to do is, this is what the Fuller brooch is about. So over here is taste. Somebody's tasting. If we go with the description here, somebody's got the sense of smell. Somebody's got the sense of hearing and touch and sight. And as you all know, these are the 4 senses. And the little pellets here, you've got the little pellets sticking out here, the number 4 again, and the 4 panels. And it's almost as if the person is riding on front of some kind of vessel there. And again, you've got these side-on brooches, lots of mythology. I'm not going to go completely through this, but lots of mythology here as it's described. They love their mythology, and a little bit of a face mask there if we enlarge. Nice face mask. That is actually a treasure from Scotland. Slightly similar, okay, and that's a very similar design to the brooch that we've just seen back there, but that is a Scottish collection, Pictish. And you've got all these nice buckles, and you've obviously got these nice cloak brooches, circular, and all these other shaped ones. So many books about the Anglo-Saxon art is out there. You've just shown one today. And one thing I just want to quickly show you, we're not going to be doing the Staffordshire Hoard, but you can look that up on the internet. 2 minutes with a slurp. Church. You can see this here. This is typical Saxon architecture. There's some really good Saxon architecture in Britain. And you've got this here. This is a beautiful piece of Anglo-Saxon cross shaft. So that would have existed in the yard of a church with a nice base. That's carved, still outside, strange, but it's really beautiful. You can see all the different panels, all to do with Christianity, taken to about the 600-700s when they've really turned to Christianity.
Where was that?
This is in Masham Church, St Mary's Church, Anglo-Saxon Church, Masham in North Yorkshire. This is in Northamptonshire. This is Brixworth Church in Northamptonshire. Brixworth Church, lots of Roman material in there. It was a minster church in Northamptonshire, and basically the community from all around brought Roman material for the construction of the church. That's what would have exactly happened with your church in Llantwit Major. But that church is not the original, as you well know. But that's another story altogether. This is beautiful carving on a sarcophagus again. Sarcophagus from an Anglo-Saxon church. And you're looking at this here. And this is St. Peter's, associated with the Saxon shore fort. Mainly completely made out of Roman material. Saxons usually stayed away from Roman towns and cities, but forts they usually occupied. And this is completely made out of, except for the top bit, Roman reused material.
Are you going there on the Colchester trip? Was it so near?
Might do. I'm not giving too much away. St. John's Church again, more carving, and we'll lead this to an end, a conclusion. And there's some slides that I will open with next week because I don't want to rush. And what we're going to do, this enters into next week, so I will slip over to next week. You see that there? See that design? That is in a church known as Rixworth, St Mary's. That there is exactly the same carving as carving I've been trying to identify from the outside of the church at Lisworney for the past 6 years. And if you look at that relief there, from Lisworney Church, and this is at Lisworney. Wired piece of Anglo-Saxon stonework is at Lisworney, and the way this is formed. And do you know what? I'm going to open this next week with this, if you're okay with that. Are there any questions on the Anglo-Saxons this week? And do you know what? I still managed to do 2 hours, and I still wasn't able to complete it all. But are there any questions? And those have got raffle prizes. I've just got to check them over. I've just got to write them down. So just hang around for that. Any other questions?
Wasn't Yorkshire, it's a bit south for Northumbria then? Did you say there were Anglo-Saxons in Yorkshire?
Yes, there were, because you've got Northamptonshire and you've got Yorkshire, North Yorkshire, so it's there. They do exist. They gradually got there, basically, not initially. One other question, go for it.
I'm fine. Yourself?
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, she's at home.
Right, okay then. Thank you very much, everybody. Safe journeys home. And thank you very much for your support. And I'll see you all next week. Anyone not here next week, Goff? You won't be here next week? I'll keep in touch with you. That's good. Thank you very much. Oh, actually, I'm going to ask you the question. Have you all enjoyed the lecture today?
No, rubbish! Rubbish! Who said that?